My name is Eli Zahner, and I'm the CEO and co-founder at Universal Yomes. We shipped the boxes every month. We were not late, especially in 2020 and 2021. I rode a forklift around in 2020 to get boxes out the door, and our competitors did not. And when someone knows that Universal Yomes is gonna get them their box on time every month, they can trust the quality of the product inside. The business leading up to that year had grown somewhere between 200 to 300% year over year. So it was started in 2014. So 7 years of really good growth leading up to that. The biggest pain points that we were experiencing scaling up of the operation to kind of meet that increased volume was a problem. And we were also going through a transformation in our business model at the time where we were starting to sell products individually instead of just as a subscription box. For the first time, we actually had to care about what the inventory was in our warehouse. Previously, we would buy all the snacks and then sell all the snacks in a particular month's subscription box, and kind of whatever was left over, we would just donate.
For Fulfil, we were more in like a pen and paper model, some spreadsheets. The business started booming and it became very unsustainable, tracking inventory on pen and paper, cycle counts on a spreadsheet.
We were generally trying to follow a bespoke best-in-class approach where we would go and we'd figure out what problem am I trying to solve and what's the best-in-class solution to go solve that problem. When we were looking for ERP software, the starting point was, what's the best-in-class solution for a direct-to-consumer business like ours? Fulfil really stuck out from the pack in terms of being designed specifically for a business like ours.
Prior to being here, I had a good amount of experience in ERP systems, worked in Microsoft's solution, which is Dynamics, worked with NetSuite. Something I appreciated in coming onto the team, starting to use Fulfil, is that it was very fluid. I was able to pick it up. I feel like it is extremely user-friendly, and one of the positive sides of it is that it is learning curve is smaller than any other ERP systems I've used.
It wasn't just about implementing Fulfil, it was also about implementing the business practices that needed to accompany Fulfil. Having gone from no ERP to ERP, it's like, what were you not doing before that you need to now start doing to make use of this tool that you now have? So I think a lot of the implementation was more about us having the right conversations internally about how we wanted to run the business, and then figuring out how Fulfil could help support that.
The thing I appreciated was self-guided training, guides, videos, so that I could get familiarity with the system. It was nice to be able to have something that actually walks you through and shows you what everything looks like before you click and break something. And having access to the sandbox environment and be able to actually trial through some transactions was very useful as well. Knowing how an ERP works, the learning curve was probably a little less steep for me, but I have had users on the team for a few years now that being introduced to the training materials and making sure that they actually walked through it are now more super users.
I have learned the lesson that if you really want to make the most out of Fulfil, and if you run a more operationally intensive business, you should not disconnect from the software. It is a tool that will amplify you in whatever direction you are going. If you take the time to refine your business practices and how you're using the software, it will empower you to have a competitive advantage over others.
Every first of the month, our 100,000 plus renewal orders sink in. By the 5th of the month, usually we start outputting up to 10,000 boxes in a day. During peak season, we can output up to 20,000 boxes in a day. Fulfil has allowed us to trace back a batch number to a pallet ID, and that allows us to resolve any issues proactively instead of like accidentally shipping something and then it's gone in the network. We like to use a batch system where we batch orders that meet a certain criteria. So we have like 200 plus batch templates created right now. In the past, before Fulfil, our process of printing labels was extensive. It required at least 2 to 3 people. With Fulfil, we were able to cut that down to 1 person.
Fulfil allows us to track all of our inventory with expiration dates and has implemented more and more automation rules that allow us to automate the use of first expiring, first out logic. Being a company where we've generally prioritized finding the best in class software for each individual use case, data is very fragmented across many different systems, and that makes collaboration harder. Fulfil really steps in as that forcing function to say, like, these types of data that is specific to a product, data that is specific to a supplier, that needs to be in Fulfil. And if you are asking me for this information, anybody in the company, if you are asking someone else, what is this information, you're doing it wrong, because you should be going to Fulfil for that information. And I think having a clear answer to that question cuts down on a lot of organizational noise where people don't know where to go for things.
The system itself is extremely user-friendly and more user-friendly than other ERPs that I've used. Because it was a ground-up solution, there's less float. Something links to something else, I can drill down into that as much as I want. So I can get all the way back to the item card with a few clicks. I can get to the vendor with a few clicks.
The more I started training people on my team and realizing, oh, we can create an automation rule for this to kind of bypass the manual interaction with it.
When we have hit that rare roadblock where what we need is truly very custom to our business, and it's not something that Fulfil could build that would make sense for really any other client but us, we've been able to utilize Fulfil's API and data warehouse to extend Fulfil's functionality. Well, recently, we built a custom MRP to help us with planning and purchasing of the components that we need to make finished goods, and also sales of those components individually. Where it got really complicated was expiration dates, specifically expiration date requirements being different for different types of customers. One retailer requires 180 days, another retailer requires 90 days of shelf life remaining when we ship it to them. My consumer, when I ship to them directly, I only need 30 days on it. What we were able to do is we were able to build our own software where we could use Fulfil as the system of record for all of the data so that we didn't need to be storing data in some outside database, and we could continue keeping everything centralized in Fulfil. I've personally been getting a ton of value out of using AI to build custom software or like extend Fulfil's functionality. That can be a really big competitive differentiator for your business. AI is a real equalizer in terms of like people who didn't go to college for computer science can like actually be very productive with it. I feel like we collaborate with Fulfil at like 3 different levels. The first line of defense is the support team. Fulfil's team is smaller. To some extent, you start to learn the names of the people that like work on the support team, and there's some level of like human relationship that exists. The second line for us is our account manager. We meet every other week. There's like a through line to our business, right? That's someone who understands what we do at a deeper level than each individual support agent is able to do. And then the third level is the leadership team. The most unique thing about Fulfil being a smaller company, you actually have some level of access to the leadership team as an individual client. The leadership team is very client focused. Definitely makes you feel heard as a client, like someone is designing features for you and like understands your business.
It's a support ticketing system. There's a familiarity with our business. There's a familiarity with the data that we are using. They're very fluent with understanding our specific business cases and able to fit within that interface. Support and success in completing the actual question is what's forefront.
Once we started opening support tickets, there's like a very simple model, and I've trained my team to do that. What's the issue on? Like the urgency, description, and error, upload a picture. So depending on the urgency that we select, we will hear a response between 1 to 3 hours.
I appreciate having the benefit of having lived through the COVID era because I actually have some sense of like what is likely to happen. I think it's an interesting time if you are willing to take some risks and not just be pessimistic that the worst case outcome is going to happen. You can make different decisions than what the field is making and potentially get some pretty great returns off that if you make the right bets. ST was on site during our implementation. Kabir's been on site 3 or 4 times at this point. And I know that typically that hole would be filled with some third-party specialist that you are paying a lot of money. And so I think having access to that, I think when you're using any software tool that is not designed for marketers to use, but is designed for like operations people or finance people to use, the expectation for a user interface is like 1990s. It's really great having a user interface that is much more modern. It really speeds up the learning curve, especially when you're hiring people in their 20s and 30s who are going to come in and work with the software. They're able to learn it much faster and move through the software much more quickly. And having a software platform that was built in like the last decade is truly very differentiated from a lot of existing backend software that's 20 or 30-year-old user interfaces.